Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast, and welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
So everyone has heard about the Anansi's Goatman story, but not many people are aware that he wrote multiple tales on /x/, most lost to time until now, including another Goatman encounter.
So the next one I'll be telling, hopefully tomorrow, will be one from my buddy. I think he might be lurking the thread. I don't know what he wants me to call him within the story, but we'll figure something out. But basically, like I said, Goatman has been a kind of boogeyman for his res, and he told me this story about these folks way back in the day, would have encounters with it similar to the one I had. Basically one day, and he can correct me if I'm wrong, but there was some kind of dance or something, and there was an extremely attractive gentleman there, and all of the women ended up dancing with him and being really smitten. As the night wore on, someone noticed that this guy had the legs of a goat, something that not even his dance partners had noticed the whole time. The story kind of weaves in and out of the history of the reservation, and it seems like everybody up there had seen this, so maybe it's not as rare as I believed it was. So apparently, from what people in the thread said and what my buddy, who I will call Rojo for the sake of the story, this story is one that has many origins and is actually pretty popular in a lot of cultures. There's even one I found about how the Christian devil would show up at places and nobody would notice until someone saw his goat legs. So this story makes me wonder which came first, the Goatman or the hooves. Maybe it's the case that people in various cultures have different names for the same entity, which is often the case. But historics aside, the story starts way back in the late 1800s, right after the Menominee were granted their 10 original townships for reservation land. There had always been stories amongst native groups about things like the Goatman. The Plains native groups have skinwalkers and the Wendigo. There have always been things that haunt America. But as time and progress moved on, I think a lot of these things were shunted around or forgotten or given new identities. In my opinion, it doesn't matter what you call something, it matters what it is. So back then, because natives and whites were largely doing their own thing, there was a bar or a drinking hall where natives went to congregate and carouse with each other in their own land. One night, they had a gathering. There were lots of natives, lots of people that didn't know each other as well as they should, and there was a lot of dancing. Now, later in the evening, a handsome fellow walks into this congregation. And when I say the man is handsome, I mean he's peach, a dandy, real hot shit. So all of the women are instantly smitten and drawn toward this guy. As the night goes on, they flirt with him, dance with him. Hell, some might have even taken him somewhere quiet to have a bit of private time. The man never says a word. No matter how much they chat him up, no matter how many women make eyes at him, he just remains alluring and silent. As the night wears on, there's an older man that comes in. He's walking around all of these dancing people when he notices the handsome man, who is wearing a long black trench coat. Nobody had taken it as odd that this guy never took off his coat, even inside dancing and working up a sweat. Nobody but this older man. He looks at the man, and is the first person all night to examine the man's legs, which terminate in the bandy legs and the cloven hooves of a goat. The man sees him looking and fades back into the crowd, disappearing, and the man, scared, rouses the alarm, telling people what he saw. At first, people are skeptical, but he's so hysterical, so sober about what he saw that eventually they do believe. They find the man dancing with one of the more curvy women on the res. When the man sees them, he makes a beeline for the door. As he bumps people trying to get to the door, more and more people start to notice his goat's legs. People start screaming, shouting, and pointing out this man, and the whole room is in hysterics by now. But by this time, he's already at the door and out of it, into the night. This story was passed down from one generation to the next, people telling their kids that the Goatman was always lurking around. It became their local boogeyman, and began to inhabit that place between tradition and scientific disbelief. I think /x/ has a good grasp on that kind of cognitive dissonance, where you want to believe in, or truly believe in something that your rational and logical mind tells you just can't be. Well, that's where this story pretty much resided for my buddy Rojo. Now fast forward through years of retelling this story, because I guess that's what it is, a story. Now my buddy has lived on the res all his life, and being a native is pretty much, from what I've seen, like being any other minority but with more history and connection to their past. Me and him met back in 2007 during a summer where we stayed in the same building. He was doing an internship and I was doing summer school. Then my senior year of college, he ended up coming to the school himself and we decided to be roommates. Getting drunk one night, we end up telling each other stories. After I told him my story, which I didn't even equate with or know about Goatman at the time, he gets really uneasy and was pretty much like, well, great. He goes on to tell me, I'm not the first person to have this sort of encounter. As I said, he's lived up on the res, and quite a few natives had also come to school where we were. I ended up later meeting and confirmed the story I'm about to tell you with the buddy he has in question, Cody. It starts back in the winter a few years back, during hunting season. Because the reservation is a lot farther north and fairly close to a lot of lakes, as well as one of the Great Lakes, they had been getting a fair amount of snow this season. Cody had gone out to do some hunting and just get drunk and hunt. So for the early part of the day, they sit up in blinds waiting for the deer to come past. Eventually, drinking beer and sitting in the stands got too boring, so they decided to try to flush something out on their way back to their truck. It's a bit of a hike from the deer runs, so they all start marching their way back, keeping out an eye for any movement. As they get near to a stream, one of Cody's uncles pipes up, "Hey, do y'all see that over there?" Thinking he means a deer, they all look to where he's pointing to find nothing. Cody's older cousin says he doesn't, but as they stand watching, they see something moving through a stand of trees parallel to them, off maybe about 100 yards off the track they're taking. So they quietly make a beeline for it, crunching through the snow and trying to spook it. As they get closer, they see that it's not a deer, it's a man. But the man isn't wearing the blaze orange of a hunter. Anybody who hunts knows how dangerous this can be during hunting season, and it accounts for a lot of deaths for people that think they're being slick and try to camo themselves too well and end up getting shot. So they figure it's some white guy weekend warrior come out to try to bag him a buck. They don't want the guy to get hurt, but they also don't want to call out to him and startle any potential game in the area. So they pick their way closer to him, and he's steadily moving deeper into the forest. Eventually, they break through the tree line to the small river. The flow of the river is warming up things a bit around it, so there is mostly just frozen mud or sloshy mud. They see he's been following a small creek, but he's way farther down the stream than them. Cody's cousin is the first out of the tree line, and by the time everybody else is out, the guy has gone back into the woods. That's when Cody's cousin grabs his father and says, "We need to stop following him. That's not a person. It's leading us deeper into the woods." His father asks him what the hell he's talking about, and the cousin says that he saw the man's bottom half before he disappeared back into the tree, and that it was a goat's bottom legs. So they all tease him and basically tell him that he's a pussy and needs to man up, but he's adamant about what he saw. They end up following the guy a little further, saying they'll go back if they don't catch him soon because they are getting pretty far away from the car at this point. So they walk down to about where they saw him go back into the trees. As they get down there, Cody says he looks down at the snow and see hoof prints in it. He points this out to the rest of the people, saying that this might be a deer trail, and that maybe the guy is trying to stalk a buck. That's when his uncle freaks out. He points out the fact that there is only one set of tracks, and that those hoof prints the wrong shape. There are only 2 of them, not 4, and that they are way too large to be deer tracks. So at this point, they all freak out and turn around and start heading back to the car. On the way back, the woods are silent, and they keep thinking they see somebody off in the distance. When they finally get back to the trail they were on, they see that the tracks they had seen back by the river are now all over the tracks they had left earlier, and they lead off in the direction that they now have to go to get to the car. So now they're really freaked out and they try to hurry back to the car. The tracks head all the way back, and then right up to the car, there are marks around the car, like the thing went all around the car, and then leading back off into the forest. They hightail it out of Dodge, got in the car and booked it and go back to drop everybody off. Cody gets dropped off at his uncle's place and they all talk about it, and eventually they calm down. Over the next few days they tell people the story, but nothing happens. and they never actually saw the Goatman's legs, so it's up in the air. Fast forward a week, and Cody ends up going over to his uncle's house to play beer pong and chill. He brings his girlfriend with him. The uncle and the cousin tell him they'll drink, but they can't get too shit-faced because they both have work in the morning, and they have to keep it down because the missus of the house has work early too. But he and his girlfriend are welcome to spend the night and get as drunk as they want, which they do. So they end up getting toasty and drunk off their asses there and spending the night. Everybody falls asleep, only to be awoken with a huge crash at 2 in the morning. Everybody gets up to see what the hell is going on. When they get down to the main floor, there's no sign of what's broken at first, until they go down to the basement where they had been drinking. They have those high-set, small, rectangular windows, and 2 of them are smashed halfway in. They go outside to find that something has tried to smash its way in. So at first they think it's some of the neighborhood kids coming down, but it's so late and their house is off up in the woods. So they figure if they are going to come and vandalize a house, why do it here? And especially when they see the house has people in it. So they end up taping the windows up from the inside and going back in. The next day, Cody wakes up and eats breakfast, and he and his girlfriend decide to chill there for another night, as they both don't have work and are ready to drink again. His uncle tells him to keep an eye on the house and to just call the tribal police if they see any kids hanging around the house. Cody says that's cool, and they sit and have breakfast until his cousin comes down and starts talking about Goatman, saying what if the Goatman followed them back, joking about it. Cody hadn't told his girlfriend, so they end up in a whole conversation about it because she's not native and hasn't ever heard the story. Meanwhile, his uncle ends up leaving for work, followed by the mother and his cousin after he finishes his breakfast. So Cody and his girl end up cleaning up after breakfast, going outside for a smoke and then coming back inside and watching some TV and chilling. After a while, things get a little bit hot between them, and they go back up to the guest room to get it in. While they're up there having sexy time, they hear the back doorbell ring. So they hop up because Cody doesn't really want to get busted in the middle of it. But then on his way down to see who it is while his girlfriend gets dressed, he realizes it can't be one of the family because they all have keys and wouldn't be ringing the bell. So he gets down to the back hall and goes to the door and looks out. And there is his aunt standing on the back porch, just looking around. So he opens the door and says, "Hey, Auntie, what's wrong? Did you forget your keys or something?" He opens the door and she comes in and doesn't say anything to him, just kind of nods and walks past him into the foyer and goes upstairs. He ends up staying downstairs and getting himself a beer and then going back upstairs. When he gets up there, his girlfriend is sitting on the side of the bed. He asks her did she see his auntie, and she says no, that she hadn't, but that she had the door closed while she was getting dressed and had just opened it. He looks out one of the windows of the room and doesn't see her car outside. So he goes back out to ask her if she's having car problems. His auntie is nowhere on the second floor of the house. He ends up looking around for her in all the bedrooms and the bathrooms and checks downstairs, calling loudly where she would obviously have heard him, and gets no response. Eventually, he just calls her cell phone, and he gets through to her. She's whispering, and she asks him what's wrong, and for him to call her on her work number because she isn't supposed to be on personal calls at her job. He ends up just grabbing all of his stuff and his girlfriend, locking up their house and leaving, in case they start to have a break-in or they'll come home and find their front door wide open, or obvious signs that someone's been in their house. So they call the police, and they come out and canvass the area. They don't find any signs that anything has been stolen. The only thing they do note is that the break-ins do seem to be happening to a few other people as well, namely the people that had been out on that hunting trip. So Cody has his own place and stays with his girlfriend. They start having a weird feeling in their little townhouse, which is on the second floor of a set of row houses, like someone is watching them. Eventually, the snows up there get heavier, and they figure that there is something weird going on because now they start seeing the same hoof tracks down outside their window, like the things followed him home and just been standing outside the window and then going back into the little wooded area behind his house. Or he'll come out to clean off the car and find there's a circle of hoof prints around his car. This goes on for months. Finally, one day, he's sitting at home by himself, watching SportsCenter and mind his own business when he sees the front door knob just slowly start turning, like someone's trying to open the door up without locking it. He just watches it for a while and then sneaks up to the door right before he gets up to see who the hell it is, and the knob just stops turning. He jerks the door open and there's nobody. He looks up and down the hallways and only sees a guy with goat legs start coming back down the hallway. He closes the door, and just as he locks it, the door starts to rattle again. So he goes and calls the police and says somebody is trying to break in. By the time they get there, the rattling has stopped. The police end up coming and searching around for whoever has been harassing him. They don't find anything. The patrol officer gives him his badge number and tell him to call if there are any more disturbances. They end up sitting out in their patrol car for a while, but after about 20 minutes they pull off and go about their business. 5 minutes later, the door is rattling again. Cody doesn't want to call them again, because he didn't want them to feel like he was jerking them around. At the same time, he doesn't want them to think he's the res crazy, so he just turns up the television. As it gets later and later in the evening, he realizes that his girlfriend should have been home an hour ago. So now he turns down the TV and realizes the rattling has stopped, but he doesn't know when it stopped. From what he said, his girlfriend usually comes home around the same time every day because she doesn't live far away. So he calls her a few times and it rings and rings, but there is no answer. From what he said, she usually turns her phone off or to vibrate when she's at work and then forgets to turn it back on if she doesn't have to text somebody or use it. So at first he's not too worried. He goes outside and doesn't see anything in the hallway, goes down to check if the car is there, and it's not. So he goes back upstairs and calls her mom to ask if she's seen her. The mom says no, she hasn't heard from her today. So now he starts to worry. But it's not super late, but with the thing with the door, it's just niggling at him. So he starts calling her friends and co-workers. The co-workers say she left work at the usual time. He calls one friend named Joe and asks if he has seen her. Joe says, "I just saw you guys driving up the road out this way maybe 30 minutes ago." He asks her how she figures that, and she says she knows their car and saw his girlfriend driving, and that there was a guy in the passenger seat that she had just assumed was him. So now he's freaking out, but he gets a call from his girlfriend's mom again. She says that her daughter just showed up freezing and scared out of her mind. She won't say what happened, but she's just really shaken up. So he puts on his clothes and runs straight over to her house. He gets there, and as soon as he goes into the room with his girlfriend, she freaks out. Her mother asks him what the hell has he been doing to her daughter. They get into a big argument, and he basically tells them both he has no clue what is going on. His girlfriend keeps going,
"Is it really you? Cody, swear to God it's really you."
So he's like, "What the hell are you talking about?" She busts up crying, and when she finally gets a hold of herself, she tells him. She had come home as usual, wanted to go get some groceries and stuff for the house. She had come upstairs to tell him to go and get the stuff with her and pee, and found him, Cody, standing at the top of the steps. So she had told him to come down, and when they had gotten down, he had gotten into the car on the passenger seat. When she asked him how he was doing, he hadn't answered her, just sat there. She had driven halfway to the store when she got a weird vibe as he wasn't talking or looking at her. He had been acting so weird she pulled the car over and tried to talk to him. She said that he had moved really weirdly, like he was boneless. Had turned grabbing for her in the car, his mouth open wide, making a sound she couldn't even describe. At this point, she starts crying again, and he ends up consoling her and telling her mother the whole story. After she calms down, she says the thing had slithered. That's not the word he said she used. I just think it's the most accurate. Toward her in the car, screaming and making this noise, and she had bailed out, leaving the keys in the car with it. It had come out behind her, and she had run through someone's yard trying to get away, hearing it shambling and breathing heavily a ways behind her. When she had gotten over to her mom's house, it had made a nasty squelching and hissing and chasing her across a few people's yards, until she finally made it up to her mom's and got inside. From what I understand, this was the end of it for a few more months. They have issues on and off, seeing this thing in the middle of the night standing outside their window, the door rattling around while they are at home. So because of this thread, and because I was going to spend time up on the res with my buddy anyway, I'm going to go visit and try to document some of this stuff. I know this is a weekend. But there will be more story once I go for a visit, and once I talk to him again.
If you liked this tale, then I suggest that you check out the previous entry. The two versions I recommend that check out is either Time 6 or Tetsuya's rendition of it. The links to their videos will be in the description.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel, as more green texts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.
Remember to check out the Odyssey page in the description for a second archive of the channel's videos.
There's also a Rumble archive as a backup.